Hi, sweet friends. How are you? First of all, thank you so much for your sweet messages regarding Jackie in our last video. We are so very grateful that she touched so many of your hearts. We miss her so much every day. Thank you to every single one of our Patreon patrons. Thank you for your Etsy purchases, and to everyone who has helped us give our rescues the care they deserve.
On a quick side note, I don't think we ever mentioned that we have a few new items on Etsy. Anna actually designed some digital downloads that can serve as activism signs or even artwork for your home. Just download and print at your local printer or Vistaprint in the size that you desire.
We're not sponsored by Vistaprint. You can use any printer.
Yeah.
Let's begin today's topic. We got COVID. In fact, we were both still positive when we shot our last video.
Yeah.
We actually know very few people who have not yet gotten it. It seems like everyone might eventually get it, especially now with the new, more contagious variants.
So I tested positive first, and then Anna tested positive 3 days later. We are both negative now, and we wanted to share our COVID story. You may ask yourselves, how is this relevant to veganism? Are we vaxxed and boosted? And we will talk about that later too. So to start, Anna works from home as a VO artist. I am a boutique guitar builder, and I work with a team of 4 other people at a very small workshop.
Brian builds and paints pretty badass guitars.
I cannot confirm the badassness of them, but I do build and paint guitars. And because of the sawdust and the paint fumes, everyone on the team wears not just masks, but heavy-duty respirators. That's how contagious this thing is. It could have been that I touched the computer keyboard that everyone uses, and then I touched my face. I don't know. I also frequently do use my boss's phone to photograph our guitars. It was on a Friday that my boss informed me and the team that he was positive for COVID and would be quarantining. By that point, 2 out of the 4 team members had already had COVID. Myself and 1 other person had not. That same day when he told me that he was positive, I went to a clinic and got a PCR test, which came back negative. I home tested that evening, and that was also negative. That Sunday, I started to feel like a scratchy, raw throat, almost like the beginning of a sore throat. So I took an at-home test before I started my work week, and that came back positive. So then I took a second one, just to be sure, and that one was positive too. And thus, my 5-day quarantine began. The following day, I felt fatigued and low energy. I did have a fever of about 100 degrees or so. That's 37.8 degrees Celsius to the rest of the world, who intelligently uses Celsius. I don't understand Fahrenheit, we shouldn't use it. I did have like an occasional cough.
Yeah, but mostly it was the fatigue, right?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly just napped that first day, and I did some work from home on the computer. I drank a ton of fluids, and we had chamomile tea, and we ate a ton of fresh salads and fruits and grains and legumes, like just whole plant foods. And I quarantined in our guest room for the first 3 days. And by the second day, I was already feeling a lot better. My tiredness was almost completely gone. I did a mild workout outside. I did some trimming. I trimmed some bushes. I wanted to go outside and get some sun. I still had the lingering sporadic cough. I might have lost my sense of taste for 8 hours or so, because we had this rice and lentil dish, and I don't think I was able to taste it, although it was completely unseasoned except for salt. So I'm not particularly sure. We ate that for dinner at the end of the day, and then the next day, everything was seemingly back to normal.
It was so funny though, because the next day we went for a walk outside and Brian's sense of smell seemed to be heightened.
Yeah.
Things that he usually wouldn't notice.
Yeah, I smelled cologne, and it was coming from a car that drove by us with the windows open. And then I distinctly smelled a woman's perfume from the sidewalk. And that was seemingly coming from this gathering at a house that we passed. I kind of felt like Wolverine a little bit. And that was pretty much the extent of it for me. I mean, every day after that, the cough got better. And as I said, my most noticeable symptoms were the fatigue at first and a slight cough.
On my end, despite Brian quarantining in the guest room for the first 3 days, I was pretty convinced that I had already been exposed before he started experiencing symptoms. And sure enough, 3 days after Brian tested positive, I remember I was watching TV and I started feeling a really distinct tickle in my right nostril. It was like this practical. So I took an at-home test and the line immediately turned bold. It's funny because on all the tests we took, they tell you to wait 15 minutes, but literally the second the liquid reached the point where the line appears, it was like, you are definitely positive.
Seems like positives show up right away.
My symptoms were a little different from Brian's. I did not feel a scratchy throat at all, but I did feel lower back aches, and I am so thankful for that heat blanket you gifted me for Christmas, because that was so soothing. The second day I felt that fatigue. By then I told Brian to just get the heck out of the guest room and keep me company, and we just binged This Is Us until the very end.
That's true.
I did get a temperature of 101, I had some chills, but mostly the fatigue. On the third day, I no longer had a temperature, but I did discover that I had completely lost my sense of smell and taste, like zero. I couldn't even taste a lemon. I also developed this sporadic cough, and then by the fourth day, I was pretty much back to normal. I had even regained my sense of taste and smell, which I thought was going to be one of those lingering symptoms.
We are so grateful for the quick and smooth recovery and the mild symptoms. And of course, we attribute so much of that to, we eat a relatively whole food plant-based diet. When you consume whole plant foods, you are freeing your body of inflammation and you're flooding your body with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, so your immune system can more effectively handle these kinds of emergencies. But we also attribute our light symptoms to being double vaccinated and boosted. We admit back when the vaccine was first released, we did take our time getting vaccinated. We were skeptical, but the following points are what convinced us to become vaxxed and support vaccination.
Number 1, vaccines are the reason we practically eradicated diseases like polio, rubella, tetanus, whooping cough, measles, all of which can be deadly.
Number 2, we need to be careful not to ascribe to the belief that just because we've been lied to about one thing means we've been lied to about everything. Yes, as vegan activists, we know the animal ag industry lies to consumers. And we also know that governments lie to citizens. But that doesn't mean that everything that comes from an official institution is necessarily a lie.
3, we know that this vaccine was tested on animals. We all know that. When we say that veganism is about doing the best you can as far as is possible and practicable, this is what we mean. We knew that if we didn't eradicate this virus, it was going to keep mutating, and more vaccines would need to be developed, hence more and more animal testing. So we wanted to be part of the movement that contained the virus to minimize animal exploitation in the long term. But what is happening now? We should be done with this by now. But that is not the case.
4, finally, we did it for the other. While we are young, healthy, active, we exercise, and thankfully we can afford health insurance, there are many people who don't have health insurance, who are now on respirators. We did it for the elderly, for people with pre-existing health conditions, people of low socioeconomic backgrounds who risk losing their jobs if they miss work. And we did it for the animals, not just because of the animal testing, but because, guess what? Although not common, COVID can be contagious to animals, which was one of the things we worried about the most when we had COVID, which is why we both still masked here at home to protect our vulnerable little family members.
Thankfully, everyone seems fine. The literature by now is very clear that being vaxxed and boosted prevents serious illness from COVID. A French study of more than 22 million people over 50 found that vaccination reduces the risk of dying or being hospitalized with COVID-19 by 90%. 22 million people. This isn't debatable. It is simply fact at this point. I literally can't do my job if I can't breathe or speak. My livelihood depends on my voice. If I can't make a living, that puts my family at risk. Why run that risk? The conspiracies surrounding COVID vaccinations just started to sound so nonsensical to us, like this fear of being tracked. Hello? This fear of it altering your DNA, even though mRNA, messenger RNA, doesn't even have the ability to alter DNA because it cannot penetrate the nuclear membrane, and it is in the nucleus of the cell where our DNA is located. It's just completely, utterly illogical nonsense.
And also, oh, I'm vegan, so I'm safe, which is, quite obviously, not necessarily true. I'm vegan, I got it from a non-vegan, but then I passed it to a vegan. We equally know vegans and non-vegans who have gotten COVID. As we said, it's hard to think of someone who hasn't gotten COVID, and they have all had varying severity of symptoms, with our vaccinated friends and family having much less severe symptoms.
All of these irrational fears sound very me. You know what I fear? Being the reason I cause pain or even death to a friend or family member or someone else's friend or family member. We get it. There's this distrust in our government, and rightfully so. Heck, I feel like this country is quickly becoming exceptionally divided, and that is trickling down to our families, our social circles. But in the end, when we observed what was going on around us, and I don't mean necessarily through the media, but literally now, we personally know people who have died of COVID.
People like to rag on these folks saying things like, oh, well, they weren't vegan. They had pre-existing health conditions, so of course they were going to get sick. Those people are still human. We have non-vegan friends and family we care deeply about.
I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, but I think we'll cap it here. We know this subject is a sore subject for many people, and it brings with it a lot of triggers and a lot of anger and frustration. We get it, and everyone has varying opinions about vaccination. Just be respectful in the comments section. Let us know if you had COVID. What was it like for you? And how did you tie your decision regarding COVID and what you do to protect yourself and others? How did that tie to veganism for you? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time. We actually know very few people who have not. Okay, you were right.
Baby May waits until we're just about to hit record. And then we.
Now?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're being cute. Oh, you're being so cute.
What is this?
Lie down. Oh, good
Oh,
girl.
Baby May.
Thank you, baby. Okay.
Yeah, I changed my shirt.